Okay, here's my little 2mm foam RC plane that's using a one cell power system. I wanted to do that for quite a while to see if I could get a plane to actually fly with just a one cell power system, and I'm using this little 500 milliamp hour E-flite battery that's one cell. But anyway, in case you didn't see it fly, here's a little clip. Flying into the wind. Well, it flies pretty good, but my concern is that using this AR 6300 is kind of expensive, so I want to convert it over to a cheaper 4-channel, go down from this 6-channel to a 4-channel generic model receiver. So that's what we're going to be doing, building a new power system using a different receiver that's a little less expensive. We're going to attempt with this next experiment to use a Hobby King 4-channel receiver. We're going to be using just 3 channels of it. So here's all the parts we're going to be needing. They're basically the same as what we used on the other setup, with a few changes being the plugs and the pigtails are going to be a little different. So to start out with, we're going to be using a GWS 3020 prop, and that's Hobby King part number 10038. And then we're going to be using a prop saver from BP Hobbies, and it's simply called a prop saver for 1.5mm shaft. And most of the other parts will be Hobby King. This is the motor. It's an AP03. Tiny little motor. And the part number for that is 9663. Okay, next we're going to be using an ESC for one cell battery use, and that's HK part number 9667. And here is the receiver, which is a Spectrum compatible, and it's from Hobby King. It's an orange 4-channel, and the part number for that is 11972. And then we're going to use 2 of these small linear servos. We'll have to convert the end of the plug for these. And that is 11735. And there's a left version of this and a right version of this. The other version's over here, 11737, but we're just going to use, we'll probably use 2 of these 11735s, but it doesn't matter. We could use 1 of each if we wanted to. Now for the plugs, this is to convert the servo leads to fit the receiver. So we've got 3 of these, and that is part number 9766, still Hobby King. And we're going to need a pigtail for the battery right here, and that is part number 9683. And the battery we're using is a 500 milliamp hour single cell battery from E-flite. You may choose to use a different battery. I found that this one gives ample power and enough flight time. So the first thing we're going to do is solder the motor leads to the little connectors for the ESC right there. And it'll look something like this when we get the wires all connected to it. And here's what the motor looks like with the prop saver on it. Now if you look underneath the ESC, you'll see that one side, the connector, is labeled ABC, That's for the motor. And then the other side has the pulse, the plus and the minus, and that's for the lead from the receiver. So the motor is going to be soldered onto this connector, and fortunately for us, the motor leads have already been skinned and tinned, so there's no shellac on the ends. And then the connector will plug into the ESC where it says ABC. Okay, now we're going to solder the leads to the connector. So we now get this lined up close to the connector as possible. And then just take a little solder and just tin it on. So there's the connector all soldered. Now we could have put some heat shrink on there, but that would probably just add more weight. So what we're going to do instead is just put a small piece of Scotch tape over it. Like that. So the tape not only protects it, but keeps the wires separate from each other so they don't short out. Now we don't have to worry about which way the wires were soldered on there, because if the motor goes backwards, we can just flip the connector upside down to get the proper rotation. Okay, I've taken one of these pigtails and plugged it onto the receiver right there, and I'm going to be soldering it, the signal part of this, right on here on the plug for the ESC. Now the other two wires, this is a 3-wire plug, I've skinned the insulation off a section, and I'm going to twist those and solder them onto the other 2 wires on the ESC plug. And then the end of this wire is eventually going to be soldered to one of these pigtails where it'll connect to the battery. So something like that. We're lined up and ready to solder right now, and what we have is the voltage is going to be in the middle pin right here, and then the ground will be over here on one outside pin, and the signal will be on the other outside pin. As long as that voltage is in the middle, if we get these other 2 wrong, we can just flip the connector over and we'll be alright. Now that goes down to the receiver right here, and the other 2 wires that we folded and twisted are going to come around here and be soldered to the pigtail for the battery. So that ought to work fairly well and not be too heavy. Okay, I'm going to solder this last wire onto the connector for the ESC. This is the ground wire. And I'm going to pull the heat shrink over it. That's it. Now I'm going to take this heat shrink right here, which is clear, and slide it over the pin. Like that. And now it's over the pin. And now I can just shrink it a little bit. It's so small, I'm just using the tip of the soldering iron to shrink it. And that's it. All done. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is tin the battery connector, the wires for the battery connector. And I'm going to tin the lead where I'm going to solder the first one. We've got some heat shrink tubing on these wires.
Just gotta be careful.
Okay, they're tinned. Now I'm going to solder the first lead for the battery connector, which is ground. Now I'm going to pull the heat shrink over the solder joints.
Let's have a look at that one. Get a good look at it there. Yeah.
Heat shrink is now over the top of the solder joints.
Yeah.
Might move this one up a little bit. There. Better. More centered. And now I'm just going to apply a little heat to them to shrink them. Shrink that tubing down. Alright, we've got our power system soldered. And okay, right here's the ESC, and it's now connected to the plug for the motor, which is right here on this alligator clip. And over here we have the receiver, and we're going to bind that to the DX8 radio here. And over here is our battery wire, and we're going to plug in this battery. But first we got to put the bind plug on. Okay, I'm going to connect the bind plug to the battery bind pins right here. Okay, bind plug is on. Now I'm going to connect the battery. And the little light will start blinking. Now I'm going to put the DX8 in bind mode. Alright, I'm holding the button on the DX8 to hold it in bind mode. Okay, it's got a bind. It's giving me a few beeps. Alright, it's done. Now I can unplug the battery, take off the bind plug, and now we're going to recycle the radio off and back on. And we'll plug the battery in. And now it's going to go through its beeps, if everything is okay. Alright, and now we can test the motor, see if it runs. I'm going to move the throttle stick up a little, and there goes the motor. So, test complete. On to connecting up the servos. Unplugging the battery, turning off the radio. We're done. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is solder the servo plug onto the servo lead. Now on the servo lead, we had to cross the, I think it's the black and red over, because they're not in the same order as the plug. The plug was basically signal on the yellow, red in the middle, and black, the ground, over on the other side. And this one, for some reason, had the black in the middle. So I just pulled the red into the middle and put the black on the outside to line up with the brown. So now we're going to go tin them and solder them together. Okay, now we're going to solder the servo leads onto the connector. First I'm going to connect the two reds. They're already tinned. They should just go right on there. Now I'm going to do the black.
It's the trusted one, isn't it?
They're so small, I'm not going to try to put heat shrink on them. Heat shrink tubing just is going to be too much trouble, so we'll just put a little bit of Scotch tape around them. Even electrical tape will be too big for this stuff.
Too sticky too.
Yeah. So, getting the wire in the right orientation is the hardest thing. Once you get them lined up, it's not too bad. And if you can keep your eyes from crossing on you. Right now I'm not doing too good. I can't see what I'm doing.
Yeah, you're not touching them both.
Let me get a little
They
bit.
both weren't touching either.
Let me get a little bit more solder. Now I know I got a good blob on there.
I got it pretty good.
Alright. Alright, now we're going to give a test of both servos that are hooked up and the motor all together. So I'm going to turn on the radio. Plug in the battery. You can see the servos reset there. Okay, beeps tell me I'm ready. Now let's run the servos. This is the aileron servo, and this is the elevator servo, and now the motor. And there we go, we're wiggling along and spinning. Okay, going to disconnect the battery, and our power system is now ready. Now just for kicks, let's do a weight comparison on the old power system compared to the new one. Okay, here's the old one. I've left the motor off because the motor is the same on both of them. Okay, so there's the old one, and it weighs 10 grams. Alright, and if you wanted to see ounces on that, well, it's not as accurate. Well, it's like 3/8 of an ounce, it says. Okay, so let's go with 10 grams. Now let's see what the new one weighs. Wow, look at that. It weighs 3 more grams. And that can probably be attributed to these thicker plugs and the receiver having some pretty hefty metal pins on it. So, we got 3 more grams. Will it fly? Not sure. We'll just have to see if the plane can fly with 3 more grams. Let's see. The entire plane, let's take the entire plane here with the old receiver and harness. Alright. There. So it weighed 46 grams, and now we add the battery to that, so now we got everything that was on there. The plane weighed 60 grams, and that is, looks like 2 1/8 ounces. So that's how much the entire plane weighed. So with the new system, it's going to weigh 3 more grams, so it'll weigh 63 grams instead of 60 grams. So that shouldn't be too significant. We'll see what happens. And now let's just mount it on there, and then later on we'll do a test flight. Okay, we're going to give us a little test of this One Cell power system on a brushless motor using a 4-channel Hobby King receiver.
Wow, I can barely see it on the white there.
It's pretty fast, so you may not be able to keep up with it.
Close calls.
Kill!
Haircut.
Okay, I go around one more time. I'm going to try to bring it in for a landing. Here we come. I thought I hit the wire there.
Yeah, but I had worse. Got baked.
It really blows those cubs away. I'm only on half throttle too.
Oh, that was a high reach there.
Down low, man. I did a touch and go.
I'll do a glide on landing.
Do a glide in for landing.
Yeah.
Alright, here it comes. And cutting the throttle. There you go.
Alright.
Alright, we're going to disconnect it. There we go. Let's feel the battery. The battery is still cold, so I don't think it taxed the battery too much.
Nope. The camera battery's probably getting more taxed than that battery.
Receiver is also cold, and so is the ESC. And the motor is only slightly warm. So I think we're all right.
Yeah.
So here is a plan of the plane and a few different angles, top and side view, and we're going to have a bottom view coming up. Just keep in mind this plane only weighs about 63 grams, so this plane has to be light to use this very small one cell power system.